just talk about dreams in scripture, for example. When Joseph, I don't know if you know the story that Joseph, he was Jacob's, almost youngest son, 11th son. And, he had a dream that his father and his mother and all of his brothers were going to worship him.
Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us?
And they got really jealous because he had this dream, and they ended up throwing him into the pit.
They conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit. And we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams.
And he ended up getting sold into slavery, and then he ended up in prison because, he became, everywhere, he was abused and put down, God brought him to the heights. So, when he was sold into slavery, he became Potiphar's, just the top guy. He was probably living it up. Probably a lot more comfortable than me and Carmen. As a slave, he was probably really happy. But Potiphar's wife was really into Joseph and wanted to, because he was a young guy and, he was probably working. He was all sweaty. And so Potiphar, she's like, oh, I want you. And he's like, no, I can't do that. I love your husband. He took care of me. He's been good to me and everything else. And then so she, because she was humiliated, ended up pretending that he, did terrible things to her. He ends up in jail. But he gets to jail. What happens? Everybody loves him in jail. He's the top guy. He's in charge of the jail. Here we go again, how God takes people, takes them. They're being persecuted. They're being put down. It's unfair. Joseph, I'm sure, was like, what's going on? I do my best. He's like, I don't get it, Lord. You gave me the dream. I told him the dream. Where am I now? He's in prison. And then what happens is the baker and the wine bibber for Pharaoh, they were thrown in jail. Somebody stole something important. And so you had the wine bibber, which would be the person who would be tasting the wine to make sure that it's not going to poison the Pharaoh. Then you had the baker who makes him his bread. Now there's symbolism to a baker and a wine bibber. Okay, a baker is somebody that uses yeast. Yeast makes things proud. It blows things up. Wine is, you take the grape off you scrape it, you press it, you let it stew. It's like there's a process to take a grape and turn it into spirit. Right. So you have these two individuals that are representing two different qualities in men, two different people that are there. And they have a dream. I believe it was the baker that had the dream. Somebody had the dream. And in the dream, they lay it out, and Joseph understood it. He's like, oh, this is what's going to happen. 3 days' time, you're going to be set free, and you're going to be put to death, and the crows are going to peck out your eyes. And then, of course, the baker was so angry, he beat the crap out of Joseph. Here he goes again. I'm just telling the truth, Lord. Right? You got to do the right thing. You got to do the right thing.
True.
And this is what happens when you do the work of the Lord, right? So what ends up happening? Wine bibber, freed, baker, put to death. And then down the road, what happens? Joseph goes back to his day. He's like, oh, you got to mop up this cell. You got to do this. He's in charge. Let's try to get some, pot stickers for tonight's meal. Let's do something special for the inmates. Joseph's doing his thing. And then all of a sudden, the Pharaoh has this terrible dream. And in the dream, he has these, there's these 7 cows that come out of the water, and they're so good looking and strong, and they just eat everything. They're just eating everything they can, and it's awesome. Then he has another dream, and these cows come out, and there's 7 of them, and this time they're emaciated, they're like zombies, and they're eating each other. Pharaoh is very troubled by this dream. He knows that it's important. He doesn't know what to do. So he brings in all of his wizards. There are a lot of wizards today. Right? We even have people wearing wizard hats, MAGA hats. It means wizard, for those that don't know. I'm not saying it was done on purpose. I'm just saying we're in the days of like Harry Potter. There's a lot of witchcraft going on. And he tells the wizards, he's like, you tell me what the dream means. They couldn't figure it out. But the wine bibber who keeps his mouth shut, he's like, imagine this guy's job, right, Carmen? His job is like, you get up in the morning, you're going to drink the wine. If you die, you did a good job. You know, if you die, you did good things. You don't die, you know, you can do it again tomorrow. So you do die. What a job, this guy. He was probably so scared. He spoke up. He said that when I was in prison, there was this guy and he interpreted dreams.
Right.
And he was good at it and he was right. And so what ended up happening is Joseph, he gets released. They wash him, bathe him, put him in like fancy garb, bring him before the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh tells him the dream, and he's like, there's a second dream, isn't there? Remember when you were telling me there's a second?
Yeah.
So God always establishes important dreams with twos. There'll be the first and there'll be the second. So Joseph like asks, what's the second dream? And he tells him, and he understands. 7 cows, 7 years, plenty. 7 cows, 7 years, lack. You got to store up your treasure. We're going into it. Now, the weird thing is, we had, back before like the virus of the crown and all that stuff, virus of the crown is stuff that we went through in 2020. All the crazy stuff. Before that, I was doing shows about this 7 years that was coming. I believe we're in this 7-year period, and I think it's coming to an end, and we're going to be looking at a terrible 7 years to follow. I've said it. I know it. I try to stay away from the doom and gloom, but I kind of have this feeling, and you're going to see why. Because we had these 2 eclipses, 6 years, 6 months, 6 weeks, 6 days in between these 2 eclipses. Before the eclipses, so I look at that like as a 7-year period of time. We had other things. We had this one cow that was birthed. His name was Little Bill. And he was 7 pounds. It was like the size of a kitten.
Tiny.
Then we had another cow, was 7 years old, was like the biggest cow ever or something, all within the same day. Plenty and lack. And I was like, we're going into a very interesting time. 7-year period that we're in right now, and the 7 years that follow. But I didn't know that there'd be a huge, gigantic bovine named Knickers. You probably saw the picture floating around online, right? Of that gigantic, it wasn't a cow. They said it was a cow, but it wasn't a cow. It was a Holstein steer. It was 6'4", 2,800 pounds. That was on like November 28th. Picture of strength and fortitude and getting ahead of myself. If there was ever like a show that I would say, this could be like one of those prophecy shows. It could be like a prophetic thing. This could be something, something that's playing out in the natural to explain what's going on in the spiritual. But in fact, this could be, right on the nose, if you will. Little Blessing says, did you see Jonathan Cahn's video with the cows that had the number 7 on their head? And it just like hit me, right? It was like a chill goes down, like the hairs on the back of my neck start to rise, and I go, 7. I said, that's it. I know that it's there. I know that now I'm supposed to do a show on it. And of course, we find the huge cow, the Holstein, right? 2,800 pounds. And I remember seeing him. Do you guys remember seeing that big cow? Big monster cow, a symbol of strength, a symbol of prowess. If Pharaoh dreamed that dream, see, we're going to tie all this in. Man, are we in it? Because we're about to enter into this time of lack, which is coming. Dreams play an important role. He ended up, what happened? Pharaoh's like, I'm going to give you my ring. You're in charge of the world from here on out. You're in charge of the world. This guy, nothing went right for him. Yep. You're in charge of the world. Think about that, Carl.
It's amazing. God is miraculous, that's for sure.
Joseph says, this is the deal. You're going to have 7 years of plenty. 7 years of plenty. And you're going to have 7 years of famine. So you better store up. And that's the story. And that's how Joseph ended up becoming like the second most powerful man in the entire world. Because in the 7 years that they had, where they knew that they had plenty, right? They stored everything up. They stored everything up. And that's a symbol of not just in the natural, okay? I'm not here to tell you to store up and make sure that you're prepping. Well, you should be. You should be prepped up. You should be ready to go. But you should take care of yourself and you should be ready just in case something happens. But spiritually is where I'm talking. That's the main thing. You got to be storing it up right now because there's 7 years of plenty. And when this following 7 years that happens, possibly right after that second eclipse, perhaps that'll be the time when things are going to get really tough. And why do I say that? Well, just like Pharaoh's dream and everything else, you have this one gigantic steer, Holstein steer, gigantic knickers coming out, right? Topping the scales. It's November 28th. November 29th, you got Little Bill. Yeah, that's right. So you got the world's biggest cow, the world's biggest steer, the world's biggest bovine is being showcased, and then the next day, the world's smallest? It's weird, right? Now, you know what's weird about that huge, gigantic steer named Knickers? He's 7 years old. Strange, right? Coincidence, right? Well, you know what else is a coincidence? Is within that 7 day period where I'm doing that Google search, guess what I found? I found in India, 7 cows were burned to death in an attack. 7 cows, charred, annihilated. So you got the big 7-year-old, picture of strength and picture of, jacked up, right? Monsanto-laden bovine. And then you got the 7 charred, annihilated, and you got the small cow. Great provision, little teeny bit of provision. And you got the 7 charred cows, murdered, slaughtered. And guess how many people were actually suspected of this? Well, there were as a 12-year-old and an 11-year-old. Out of these 7 are to blame for this terrible slaughter. They're being indicted for killing cows. Cow killing. I guess that's I don't know if that. I think that's the proper term. The Cow Slaughter Act of 1955. I thought back in 1955. I guess they thought it was probably good to get it on the books. You shouldn't be killing people's cows or slaughtering them or burning them. But not a good sign, right? Where you have this huge 7-year-old bovine that's huge, plentiful. Then you got the little tiny one, the little Bill. And you got these 7 charred, right? Oh, am I saying that we're entering? I don't know what I'm saying. All I do know is that this 7-year period it got my attention back when the eclipses were going on. A third of the Bible, this is true, a third of the Bible has to do with dreams, dream interpretation, visions, and so on. I mean, it's right here in the book of Job. This is when God speaks to you. I can read it because I pulled it up. For God speaks once, yea, twice. I mean, I can actually just quote this because, right, in a dream, in a vision of the night, right, He'll open up his instructions in the slumbering upon a bed. He opens the ears of men. He seals their instruction that he may withdraw man from his purpose and hide pride from him. In other words, when you're awake, it's hard for God to get your attention.
Yes.
Because you're in charge. You're like, I know everything. I'm the best. But when you're dreaming, you're silent and you become an observer and a story plays out in front of you. And you wake up and you're like, what did that mean? Yeah. What did that mean? Dreams are an important thing. If it wasn't for the interpretation of certain dreams, Joseph wouldn't have saved the world.
Right.
It's an interpretation of a dream. So I don't think anybody who is a faithful person or who goes to a church or whatever can validly say that it's too woo-woo to talk about dreams. September 10th. Mars hangs closer to the Earth than it has in 6,000 years.
like the light that led men from the east to a child in a manger, it could well be a sign of good things to come. Thomas James shall be his name. The world will change because of him. In the small town of Bethel, in a time not unlike our own, a child with a great purpose is born. Years later, alienated by his peers and abused, Thomas suffers a devastating loss. When it appears he has nothing left to live for in the world, this is when his true calling begins. While trying to escape the sinister powers that be, a terrifying vision haunts him. Miraculous events seem to follow the peculiar young man as he struggles to come to terms with what he was born to do. The stage is set. The time is at hand. The truth will rise and a revolution will begin. The startling revelation of who Thomas James is, truly, will change the lives of those around him and set off a chain of events long ago foretold. There is more to this novel than one might think. Inside these pages hides a treasure just waiting to be discovered. So if you've ever wondered if there's more to life, or why it is we suffer, then this story will not only captivate you, it may just open your eyes to a truth that could set you free. Find out what is in us all that makes us heed the calling.
Click it.